everybody. Welcome to our week number 17 Twitch live stream. I see a bunch of you getting logged in and putting your names in the chat. I'll give everybody just a minute before we get started. If someone could let me know if you can hear and see me okay, that'd be really helpful. Thank you. Just a minute here. Is everything coming through okay on your end? I can see the video and the audio. Everything looks fine on my end. But just to make sure, can you all hear and see me okay? If someone can put it in the chat, that would be amazing. Awesome. All right. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know. Perfect. So while everybody's getting logged in, let's go over to Canvas. And if you scroll all the way down, we're way down here in week number 17, which is hard to believe that we're all the way here getting close to the end of our class. So I want to talk just a little bit about last week, and then we'll look at the things that we have going on this week with your experiment proposal project and your exam that you have, along with a couple of other things. And of course, if you have any questions at any point, feel free to put them in the chat. It's a great time to ask me. Last week, so everything is graded from last week, where we were looking at our last chapter, which was chapter 4 on replication and discussion number 16. So if we pull that up, just a couple of kind of general pieces of feedback. Most of you did a really wonderful job looking at the two different research scenarios and kind of picking apart some of the ethical concerns that you could find from chapter 4, thinking about some of the questions that an IRB or an International Review Board might ask if they were examining these. The biggest thing that I saw in terms of people losing points was just not really giving enough detail, kind of not going into some of those specific questions and keeping it really general. And a few people still forgetting to respond to a classmate. So those were the kind of two biggest things, but most of you seem to do a really wonderful job of looking at some of those concerns that we might have ethically for both of those studies. That one was our last discussion, so hopefully feeling really good about that at this point. And if we look at everything else from last week as well, like I graded all of the extra credits and everything from last week. So everything that you have up until this week should be graded and in the grade book at this point. Really good idea, just to put this out there, that it might be a good idea to check your grades on everything as we kind of get closer and closer to the end of our semester. Just make sure that everything that you've turned in has been graded and scored. I have graded everything up through this week, so if you're missing something, definitely let me know. It's much easier to fix it now than when we do final grades. And so if something is missing or incomplete, definitely reach out to me and just double check that all as we move through the week. Otherwise, what we'll do for the rest of our time, we'll focus on week number 17. So for this week, if you're looking at this week, we have exam number 4. We also have the experiment proposal project with the paper, the flyer, and the video. There's a little survey and then an SLO question. And then as always, you have the extra credit opportunity for joining me today live. So let's go through each one of those things together. And as always, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. So the first thing that's under this week is exam number 4. And just like the other exams, it is worth 50 points. You have an hour, like always, 48 questions that are on there. So a couple of things like usual, don't forget to make sure that you're ready and prepared before you begin. And a couple notes on that. Obviously, make sure that you have an hour to spare, that you have good internet connection and a quiet place to take the exam, that you've gone through the study guide. And so with this exam, and I mentioned this last week for those of you who were maybe considering working a little bit ahead, this exam does have a little bit of a cumulative element on it, just because everything in this class builds on what came before. So this exam is on APA formatting part 3, chapter 14, chapter 4, and then down here what I have are all the little kind of cumulative pieces that might be a good idea to go back and review. So scientific thinking versus intuition and common sense, the different types of claims, the 4 validities, be able to identify each one of them. Go back and look at correlation directions and strengths, looking at scatter plots and Pearson's R. independent and dependent variables, correlations versus experiments, and then samples versus populations, and different sampling methods and problems. So the most of the exam will be on these chapters that we have covered these last couple of weeks, but there will be a little bit of that cumulative element. So just make sure that you do review these things right here. They're all like the big major concepts from the semester, but you definitely want to go back and make sure they're familiar and that you have some notes on them so you're not trying to find that during the test. So again, if it were me, and I've given you this piece of advice a couple of times, but if it were me, I would write or type all of that out and have that in front of me during the exam. I think that would be really helpful so you don't use any of that valuable time trying to find that information in the book or in the lecture. But a lot of you have done really, really well on the exam. So hopefully, if it's been working well for you, keep doing the same thing. So you do have that exam this week. That's one big component. The other one that you have is the experiment proposal project. And we've been working on this for a while and kind of building up to it, but you are turning it in this week. And so what you can see here is the instructions for that, followed by some samples. So I gave you a couple of sample papers, 3 of them to be specific, so that you could see what other people have done in the past. I also gave you some sample flyers, which you're turning in that one little visual aid. And so I wanted to give you a couple of examples of what that might look like. What a lot of people did is kind of highlight their study with some images and some text. And so here's one example, somebody doing their research on SSRIs. And so that's an example of what that might look like. So if you're kind of wondering what you need to do or how it should look, in addition to the instructions, you have these sample papers to kind of help you. But let's go through the instructions together and make sure that you're feeling good about it. It is worth 60 points, so more than the exam. So you definitely want to make sure that you are very clear. So the purpose of this, like experimental proposal project, is to give you an opportunity to pull everything together from the semester. So you're applying all of the principles that you've learned throughout the class. You're going to be writing a proposal. So you're not actually doing the experiment, but you're more proposing an experiment that you could in theory do if the opportunity presented itself. You're also making a short digital visual aid, something like a flyer like the one I just showed you, and then a short video of describing your experiment, what you're going to be doing, maybe even sharing your visual aid in the video. And altogether, this should be roughly 5 to 7 pages, which will include the title page and abstract for your paper. It should be APA style, right? So follow those standard APA style guidelines of standard margins and font and all of that. It should be double spaced as well, and obviously typed. You are turning it in here on Canvas. And then here's a little bit more of a breakdown of what should be in your paper. So the paper itself is worth 45 points. It should have a title page following the formatting expectations for APA formatting. It should have an abstract, and remember that the abstract should always be its own separate page. So it's just a paragraph or so kind of providing a summary of your proposed experiment, what you might expect to find, a little bit of like a description there. You should have a methods section, which should be several pages long. This is kind of the bulk of your paper. And in here, you'll be covering participants. So how many participants do you have? What are the demographics of your participants, their age, gender? How are you going to select your participants? So what would your sample procedures be? Really go into detail here about how you're going to find your subjects, how you're going to avoid sampling issues related to anything like the generalizability here, demonstrating that you know how to avoid some of those common threats to external validity. You're going to go into the design of your experiment. So you're going to talk about, is it a between subjects, within subjects, mixed subjects? What are your independent variables and the different conditions? What are the dependent variables and how are you operationalizing and measuring them? How are the the participants going to be assigned to the different groups and conditions? Again, make sure that you're specific. Here you're showing me that you know how to avoid those threats to internal validity. You're also going to then go into the procedure. So make sure that you describe enough detail that somebody could, in theory, actually do your experiment. What are the participants going to be doing from the moment they begin the study to the moment that they finish? Make sure that you stress the similarities and differences between the different groups and conditions. You're going to write up the procedure and be mindful of any potential confounds, the pros and cons of your different design that you selected. You obviously want to try to avoid any confounds if possible, but if you have some, just make sure that you address it and talk about them a bit in that area. You'll also have a discussion section where you can discuss any predictions that you might have for your experiment, along with any limitations or ethical issues that you might have that might need to be addressed. You could also consider any like future directions for study or for research. And those are kind of the main things that you're putting in the actual paper. So the paper itself, again, like 5 to 7 pages. Make sure that you cover all of these different things, really describe that in detail. Then you're also going to turn in that short little digital flyer, which should just be 1 page, and a 2-minute or less video of you describing your experimental proposal. And you don't have to be in the video, but it would be wonderful to see you if you're willing to be. But keep it under 2 minutes, that way it's not too big of a file, and you can actually upload it here onto Canvas. What a lot of people will do is put the flyer up and then like a little tile of themselves in the corner, so I can see them and the flyer, and that kind of gives you a structure to follow. But it's up to you. It's only worth 5 points in total, but I do want a chance to hear from you about your experiment. So this whole thing is due by Sunday night at 11:59 p.m. Quite a few of you have already turned it in, but it is due by this Sunday. And I gave you a really detailed rubric here of how I'm going to be grading it for the paper, the visual aid, and the video. So you can kind of look at that as a little bit of a reference if that's helpful for you. I think that is everything with the paper. Are there any questions at all about the paper or the flyer or the video, anything with the experiment proposal project? I'll give you a minute to, I know you're usually a little bit behind me, but if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And remember as well, like I said, here are some samples which should be really, really helpful for you. If you aren't quite sure how you want to format your paper, you can also see what other people did in terms of their design and how they broke it down. Some people even made fictional tables, which was kind of fun, and put them into their papers. But any questions at all? Let me put that in the chat here. Any questions about the paper or the experiment proposal project? I'll give you just a moment. And while I'm waiting to see if you have any questions, there are a couple of other things under this week. So there is a little class survey here, and it's completely anonymous. But if you have something that you really enjoyed or something that could be better, it'd be a wonderful place to share that with me, especially with this class being research methods, always trying to make it better and make some changes. So if you have any suggestions or things that you really loved, that'd be a great place to share that with me. There's also a couple of SLO questions, some student learning objective questions. As a department, a psychology department, we gather some data related to every single class. So if you could take the time to go ahead and fill that out, there's I think just 2 or 3 multiple choice questions that are takeaways from the class, which would be really helpful if you're able to answer those. And then of course I will post the recording of this in a little bit when we're done, and give you the extra credit question in a moment. Let's see here, let me put this in the chat. So I did type out a couple of reminders. So I have this one here about checking your subscription status. A lot of you fell off, and I know we're in the last week, but if you're joining me here live, make sure that you're still subscribed on Twitch so it shows up that you were here and attended. Or if you're watching it later as a recording, that is how you can still get your extra credit. Other than that, let me put the extra credit question here in the chat so that you can answer it. Copy and paste it in here. So this is the week number 17 Twitch extra credit question. So I'm going to put this here in the chat. So similar to like what I said with the anonymous survey, give me one specific thing that you enjoyed about the class and one specific thing that you might change to make it better. And so one specific thing that you enjoyed, one specific thing that you might change to make it better. And when you're ready to answer that, you'll go back to Canvas and click on optional Twitch extra credit number 17, since we're in week 17. And once you click on that, it'll bring up this page. You can click on Start Assignment up at the top. And then in that text box that pops up, type your response. And just make sure that you do this by Sunday night at 11:59 p.m. when this is due. Then you'll hit Submit for your confetti burst and pizzas. I don't know why they put pizzas in there today, but confetti and pizza, which is very celebratory. So make sure that you answer that before the end of the week. make sure you get your experimental proposal project in, that you do that anonymous closing survey, and that you also do those 2 to 3 student learning objective questions so that you get that credit, and also we can record that data as a department. So what I will do from here is I'll hang out for a little while if any of you do have any questions about the paper or about the survey or about any of the exam, anything that's due this week. Otherwise, if you're feeling good, you're welcome to go, but I will hang out for the next like 5 minutes or so if any of you do have any questions. Right. Thank you as well. I thank you for those of you who are able to join me live, or those of you who are watching this later as a recording. Sorry that I'm still so sick, but I'm definitely doing better than I was last week. So I'll take that. But if you do have any questions, I'll be here. I'm going to minimize my video so I'm not staring at myself, but I will be here and hang out for a little bit. Otherwise, good luck with all of the stuff this week. Good luck with the exam and the proposal project. If you do think of anything after we are done today, of course, feel free to email me.